Hello, this is Todd Shank with Premier FPL, doing the Gameweek 9 FPL tips. Alright, so a few things on the agenda for today. I wanted to just kind of take a look at the top points, then dive in a little bit more into some of the players who are in form, looking at some of the bonus point system for players, as well as ICT Index. Also then looking at some of the statistics as far as transfers in and out, who are some of the top owned players, some of the upcoming potential price changes, and also taking a look at some possibilities for fixtures that are coming up as well. All right, so starting out here, just kind of we're after the second international break. Thank God we're finally past that. But one thing to point out, on the official site, they do still have the warning flags for a lot of players that will probably be available, but it's primarily because the managers have not had their press conferences yet, so probably after tomorrow most of those should be changing. Usually I like to use Ben Dinnery's site for injury updates at Premier Injuries. But so that would be a little bit more updated. But again, his is usually updated based on press conferences as well. All right, so top points. I would say that the most interesting thing as far as the points breakdown goes so far is just the idea at the beginning of the season, everybody was going big at the back. And right now, the top two defenders are ranked 16th with Ricardo Pereira, and 17th with Trent Alexander-Arnold. Then followed by that is Van Aanholt and Lundstrom at 20 and 21. So, and then even after that, you have to go down all the way to the bottom. I believe that's around rank 30. So defenders are not really bringing in the points that everybody thought they would. Trent Alexander-Arnold at 17. Is the one of the highest as far as price goes, as well as second highest for points. But that was not where anybody was expecting him to be, especially considering he still has 30% ownership. Now, I will say that probably a lot of that has to do with Alisson's injury. I think all four of the Liverpool defenders would be higher if it were not for Alisson's injury. I think that there were mistakes made by Adrian that could have been clean sheets, that if Alisson was in there probably would have been clean sheets. But anyway, so top 10 here. The most interesting thing with the top 10 is you basically have nearly all of the premium players. Kane is just outside of the top 10, but other than that, so he is ranked 14th here. So even in the top 15, you have all of the premium players lumped in there. Probably the best value is De Bruyne. Obviously, he was out for the Wolverhampton match, but even despite that, is top for points this season. Probably would have been, maybe that was a difference maker in that match. Who knows, maybe if he was playing, that would have been a win for Nancy, but I guess we won't know now. But yeah, otherwise you do have Aguero, Mane, Aubameyang, Salah. The outliers here would definitely be Abraham, Pukki, and Calum Wilson. I know the big talking point this week has been about the Pukki party, whether or not to get out of that now. I know that they do have Norwich this week, Norwich has Bournemouth this week, so that could be one based on Bournemouth's difficulty with keeping anybody out of the goal. It could be a good one to keep him, but if you look at their fixtures coming up after that, Brighton is not as easy here, especially in a away match. Watford could definitely be a good one. Everton is kind of iffy. Not sure what they're going to look like at that point. Arsenal is going to be more difficult. Even Southampton away. So, I mean, a lot of these, while they may look green on FPL's algorithm, I don't think it's as cut and dry as that. So I would say the Bournemouth away, and even being away, makes it a more difficult match. But just because of Bournemouth's inability to keep goals out of their net, I think that's a tougher one. So for me personally, I think I'm done with him. Got the points that I needed, and I'm ready to move on. Calum Wilson is one that I do really like. Callum Wilson, Abraham, being in the top 10 here and under 8 for cost is pretty massive. I think that those are two of the biggest players that people need to start jumping on board with. And Mount is another one that closely follows there. The interesting thing with Vardy here at 12th in the table so far is a lot of his underlying statistics don't point to him doing well, but for some reason he's a player that kind of defies a lot of those statistics and just scores when he feels like scoring. So he's a very interesting player just because of his ability to get goals without really, I think I heard on one podcast, getting goals without taking any shots. He somehow manages to score despite having fairly poor XG stats, fairly poor shots on target, like really does not excel with a lot of high statistics there, but still manages to get goals and get points. So it's hard to look at statistics and say that he's a good one to bring in, but nevertheless, he still manages to stay within the top 15, even above Kane here. Well, I suppose he's above Kane based on, I'm not actually sure, maybe bonus points would be the reason why he is above Kane in their list, but tied on points with Kane, despite being 1.9 million less. Wesley is another interesting one at 6.1. Only 2.7% ownership. He's a good differential, but he's also rather spotty in terms of scoring points. Still, if you're okay with getting the 2 points on a pretty regular basis and then the occasional double-digit haul, then probably somebody that would be worth taking a look at. I think that it depends more on what you need in your team. I think the other one that I would say in this price bracket is Josh King. Primarily, he's another one that's going to get you a lot of twos, occasional double digits. I think the main reason that I would want King over Wesley has to do with King being on penalties. And as you can see, Bournemouth have some decent fixtures coming up, especially the Norwich and Watford matches. Newcastle away is a really good one as well. I think, let's see what Aston Villa has. That's Aston Villa. Yep, there we go. Aston Villa has Brighton, Man City, Liverpool, and then Wolves. So difficult matches. I would not recommend bringing in Wesley at this point, just because those are some very difficult matches coming up. A couple of the players that I was considering for my own team until looking at the fixtures had been McGinn and El Ghazi. They have some really, I guess all three of those players have some decent underlying statistics, but with those difficult matches coming up, I'm not sure that I really want to have them at this point. Might go ahead with McGinn or El Ghazi just to create space for midfield. I think the alternative there is Cantwell, but that would be mostly because of his price tag. Okay, so that's kind of a brief breakdown of some of the top points. I think Lundstrom is always a good one to have in the team. Interesting that Patricio is so far up here. Wolves goalkeeper, but at 5.1, I think you get better value from someone like Ryan. I think Pope will do well continuing throughout this season. But Ryan, I think, is kind of the standout here with Brighton. I would really like to find a way into Brighton's defense. Excuse me. And Ryan might be a good way to do that. The other one to think about is actually Lewis Dunk. Not in the top 30 here, but he has the ability to get assists here, pick up clean sheets. At 4.6 is a good price tag as well. So definitely Lewis Dunk is someone to definitely think about. Actually is tied on points with Robertson and Van Dijk. So again, I do think that Van Dijk and Robertson would have more points with Alisson, and Alisson is supposed to be returning. So I think this is probably a good time to reconsider looking at Robertson or Van Dijk, maybe doing a double up in Liverpool defense. That's something that I'm considering, especially their fixtures coming up are decent, at least in terms of, I think they'll be able to keep clean sheets against United and Tottenham. Aston Villa is another one. Now, game week 12 is a difficult match against Man City, and not really sure how that one will shake out for Liverpool. But at least until then, I think that they have decent fixtures. The more difficult part is figuring out who to pick up front. Knowing that De Gea is probably going to be out, could make it more a better attacking period. But the interesting thing is the expected goals against. United is actually top of the table for the lowest expected goals against. So with the 6.1, they've allowed 8 goals this season, but only a 6.1 XG against. So despite being 12th in the table, they are top as far as not allowing very many quality shots. So just something to consider with the Liverpool match coming up. I think there's a lot of factors in play there, De Gea being out, but then again, a lot of times the XG against has more to do with the defensive setup than it does the goalkeeper. So something to consider with Salah and Mane. Something I'm definitely considering with my team since I did wild card, just trying to play around and see what's going to fit best in there. All right, so the next thing here, just taking a quick look at the top informed players. Mane up here at the top has done very well recently. 2 double-digit matches in the last 4 game weeks. Aubameyang also is one that has decent fixtures coming up. Actually, well, I guess we won't really know for sure when Lacazette is coming back, but that could change where he's playing. I don't know if that's really, it didn't change a whole lot with him last season. Still scored a boatload of goals last season, so I don't think that that's really going to affect him a whole lot. Calum Wilson is definitely one that I'm considering, just because if you look at all of his point hauls this season, he's been very consistent. Underlying statistics are quite good as well. King down here is another interesting one. Traore, I know he's up here. I want to see more from him. Just scoring 2 goals against Man City in that match, I don't think he's going to be doing that all the time. Wolves have decent fixtures, so he could be a good way to get into the Wolves team at only 5.0. Not a bad way to not only be an enabler, but also be a way to get into the Wolves team, because I do think that Wolves have decent fixtures coming up here. Southampton, Newcastle away is a little more difficult. Newcastle's tougher on the road than Newcastle plays better when they're at home. But Wolves have been doing very well lately. Where are they? Not great as far as XG goes. And I think more recently they have been playing better. 11 goals this season, but I think that they have been playing better more recently and will continue to do well as they adjust to playing in the Europa League. Wesley is up here. Pereira is a very interesting one to think about. Trying to get into the Leicester team is another one that I've been trying to look at. They have good fixtures coming up here. It's kind of a matter. I think there's 4 players that I've really been considering. Tielemans is kind of on the outskirts. He might be one if I'm not able to make room for Madison in midfield. So for now, I'm leaning towards Madison and possibly either Pereira or Soyuncu. Looking at Pereira and Soyuncu, the 2 big differences there are Pereira seems to be the one that's getting shots in, getting the goals. Soyuncu, if you look at their heat maps, Soyuncu is primarily playing as a defender, but at the same time, that's where he gets a lot of he has a higher BPS baseline, so picking up points that way. With their fixtures coming up, decent fixtures in through here, I think either one of them would be good. Soyuncu is going to help with the clean sheets, getting the bonus points. Pereira has the potential for scoring goals. So one of those 2, the difference is here. Pereira is currently 6.2, while Soyuncu's on here, but I think he is at 4.7. So again, it has more to do with budget, I think, at this point. Abraham is the other one on here. I really like Abraham. Glad I picked him up earlier. Interesting thing with him is the last 4 game weeks, he leads the league in shots on target. Has scored 4 goals in that time. He actually has about a 67% shot accuracy as well. That compares to, he has 15 shots, which is second most behind Aguero. Aguero has 17 shots, but his shot accuracy is only 17.6%. The Abraham's XG on target is 4.28, which lines up very well with his goals. 4 goals with an XG on target of 4.28, very even there. And he actually has almost a 3 for his XGI, his expected goal involvement. Leading that is actually Aguero, who has a 4 for his XGI, so he's been very involved. Wesley is up there, Mane and Salah both up there as well for those statistics. All right, so moving right along, the bonus point system. I sorted by defenders for this one because I feel like that is a good way to kind of differentiate some of the defenders, particularly looking at some of these lower price defenders to figure out, Dunk versus Soyuncu versus Peters versus Lundstrom, Mings, those sorts of players, to see who are the players that are picking up more of the bonus points. And that's a good way to set them apart, particularly for a lot of these defenders who are not seen as attacking threats. So Alexander-Arnold and Robertson, both very attacking. Peters is also very attacking, but Soyuncu is way up here for the bonus points, despite being primarily a central defender, sits back and defends. Same thing with Mings, central defender that just sits back and picks up the bonus points that way. Bali is another one, a little bit higher price. Evans another one, a little higher priced here, but both have the ability to pick up bonus points. And I think that does make a big difference when you get these players who are playing consistently, and if they are able to play consistently and pick up the bonus points, you have a better chance of being able to pick up some extra points on top of whatever they get for starting the match. Now, I pulled up Mings here. He did well to start the season, but that was before they kind of got figured out by some teams. pick up the win against Norwich, but they have some difficult matches coming up. Brighton, that one's going to be very tough. Man City, Liverpool, Wolves, even now Newcastle at home could be a little more favorable for them, but I don't know that I really would want to carry Mings just for just until the end of November. So Mings is up there. He's very interesting. Now as an England international player, so he's good. I like him. I wish I could get him into my team, but the fixtures, I just don't know that I would want him because of the liability of the fixtures. I think that even for 0.1 more, you have Soyuncu, who has the better fixtures coming up here. Trying to think who else. I already have Lundstrom, but if you don't have him, that'll be a better one. Dunk here, same price tag, but I like Brighton's defense much better. They've already spent time in the Premier League. I think that they're better defensive solidity compared to Aston Villa, newly promoted team. And Brighton also have these good fixtures coming up here. Like I said before, I am trying to find a way into Brighton's defense, and I think Dunk is probably the best way to do that. Going to be a matter of, at this point, it's probably a matter of Dunk versus Soyuncu. If I'm going to keep Pereira in my team, the alternative would be to have Dunk and Soyuncu, drop Pereira, and then do something else with my 4th, 5th defenders. Looking at, if you look at this for all players, obviously primarily forwards and midfielders in here, but this is also where a lot of the defenders are able to pick up those extra points for being involved in matches. Particularly wingbacks are the most likely. Ryan is up here, which is primarily due to his saves here. His BPS baseline is quite good as well. So Pope up here as well. And this is when, when those teams really win, when they do well, the bonus points is a good way to be a differentiator. I think it's a good way to be a differentiator when you're kind of trying to compare some players. And I would say that's the same thing with the ICT Index. Now, I say this is primarily for managers out there who are not going to be paying for some of the services out there like Fantasy Football Scout, where you get a lot more data. So this is kind of a way to take a look at some of the free statistics that are available through the official FPL website. I do wish they had more filters, more ability to, if I could just look at the ICT index based on players that are, 7 million and less. I would really like that much better. But that's not an option. So this is what we have. But as you can see here, Sterling, Salah, De Bruyne, Aguero, Pukki, all up there top for the ICT index. Now, the thing with Pukki is most of the reason that he is high on a lot of statistics has to do with these first 5 matches. And even if you would sort anything by the last 4 game weeks, it's going to be skewed because of the Man City match where he, had a goal, had an assist, picked up a lot of points in that match. A lot of his statistics, his more recent statistics, weigh heavily based on this one match. So it kind of skews things a little bit. I'd be interested to see where he was in this index if you took away, especially that match, but if you took away some of those other matches, looked at more, we could get more recent data, last 2 game weeks even, I think it would be much lower. So this is just another tool, another way to look at players if you want to have a way to compare between a couple of different players. Salah is ahead of Mane. A lot of Salah's underlying statistics are, honestly, when you compare the two, they are very evenly matched. I think that Salah edges out Mane, but just barely. And a lot of it just has to do with, I think, XG-wise, Salah is doing much better. He should be playing better than he is, but just Mane, for some reason, has been scoring the goals while Salah has been a little more profligate in front of the goal. The one thing to remember here is middle of December, game week 18, Liverpool does not have a match due to the Club World Cup. The Club World Cup. Anyway, so they will not be playing here. So just keep that in mind as you come into Boxing Day matches, Christmas period. That you'll want to have some plans to. The tough thing here is they have Watford at home right before it. You definitely want to have some Liverpool players for that match, but have a plan for how you're going to move at least one or two of those out of your team at that point. Interesting place that I found recently was Live FPL. You can take a look at some of the top 10K most owned players versus overall most owned players. There's definitely some overlap here. I think some of the interesting different now, this is not necessarily, this is what their team looks like per se, but it's more a breakdown of who are the players that are most highly owned. Salah, Sterling, De Bruyne. This is pretty close to template when you look at the top 10K most owned. I'd be interested to see how this is going to change after this game week, see how many people do drop Pookie at this point. Alexander-Arnold, Van Dijk, Robertson, a lot of these guys are still in a lot of teams. I think I would definitely advocate for, an Alexander-Arnold, Van Dijk double up for defense. I think that would be a very good double up there. So I just found this to be somewhat interesting. Price changes, it doesn't look like there's any on quite yet, but Lundstrom and Henderson may be going up in price. It doesn't look like there's anybody that are going to be dropping in price, but the closest ones are Lundstrom and Henderson. I think they've already gone up this week. Injuries, like I said before, Cantwell is on here. I think he's still listed as possibly available to play. The big one, I think, is De Gea, who is now ruled out. And again, I don't know how much that's necessarily going to change that match on Sunday, but it's definitely a better situation for Liverpool attackers. All right, and then Football Fallout has the fixture tracker here, and now a lot of this, I still think you have to look at it. So Brighton against Aston Villa is a good one. Newcastle, Chelsea playing Newcastle at home. This is definitely a great week to have, at least two Chelsea players. I know Hudson-Odoi is an interesting one to take a look at because of how he played last match. He's gotten 2 assists in the last 2 matches since returning. I think that his positioning is good for both himself and for Mount. I think the big three to look at: Hudson-Odoi, Mount, and Abraham. I think Abraham is a must-own. Mount is still a must-own. His price is definitely going up. Willian gets the occasional points here, but his price tag is fairly high. Alonso, I think, would be an interesting choice. He's done well in the last 2 matches. His price tag is 6.2. I think there's better value out there, but their fixtures are quite good coming up, so he could be a good one as maybe more of a differential. 2.8% ownership, very good there. Hudson-Odoi at 5.9 and a 1.3% ownership is a really nice one as well. And as you can see here, great fixtures over the next 4 game weeks. Burnley away could be a tougher one, but Newcastle at home. Newcastle play better when they're at home, when they're on the road, definitely leak goals. Watford have been leaking goals wherever they go. Crystal Palace at home, definitely favorable for Chelsea, despite Crystal Palace playing relatively well defensively this season. So I guess just to kind of wrap up some of the big things to look at coming up, trying to find a way into Brighton's defense. Bournemouth's attack here, they have decent fixtures attacking wise. Chelsea across the board. Leicester City across the board, looking at wherever you want to go with them. Wolves attack is a good one to look at. Arsenal, a bit schizophrenic. I'm not really sure what to say about them. Aubameyang is really the only one I would trust from them right now. Everton, definitely poor. Man City have some interesting matches in here, but I would say definitely De Bruyne. Don't give up on Sterling yet. Aguero is a bit decent pick, but I would say avoid their defense at this point. Look out for game week 12 for both Manchester City and Liverpool. United, definitely want to avoid them. Newcastle, I would say to avoid them as well. Norwich, it might be time to start looking elsewhere with some of their fixtures turning. The Watford home match could be a good one, but otherwise, I think that it's time to start moving away from them. Spurs, if they start to turn things around, Kane is definitely a good one to pick, as well as Son. I think at this point, having it is kind of a matter of, do you want to go with several mid-priced, the Vardy, Abraham, Wilson front line sort of setup, or do you want to have a premium with one other mid-price and maybe Wesley up there? But I would say that if you are going to go with a premium, this might be a good time to go with Harry Kane and be able to move from Harry Kane to Aubameyang or Aguero for some of these other game weeks. So even if you started out with Kane against Watford at home, looks like a good match, you can always move over to Aubameyang for game week 10, or even Aguero for game week 10 and 11. Being able that does give you some flexibility as far as using some of those premium forwards in there. Burnley is always interesting, very defensive. So I would definitely trust a lot of their defenders, because when they're still relatively low priced and when they do get points, they are going to really boost your team. Attacking wise, most recent statistics that I looked at, Wood was definitely playing further forward. His underlying statistics were definitely better than Barnes, so I would advocate for Wood over Barnes at this point. If that would, it could change. They might swap back around, but that's what I would say with that for now. I know Liverpool is way down here. I don't know that these fixtures are quite as difficult as they are made out to be. Other than the Man City match, which that could really go either way, especially the way City's defense is this season. Having Liverpool assets, I don't think you can go wrong with having Liverpool assets, period. So, all right. Well, I think that is going to wrap it up for my Game Week 9 FPL tips. Let me know in comments below, who do you think... Actually, I didn't cover captains, so maybe this is a good time to pick out your captains for the week. I think right now I'm leaning towards Abraham for captain. You have any other options? Leave them in the comments below. If you have a good team you think that you want to promote, put your team down below, rate my team sort of situation, and then we can get in there and check out comments as well. Anyway, I think that's where I'm going to leave it. As always, wish you good luck and have fun.